Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of LANGERR at the mic. Today, we're joined by fellow Montreal Canadiens fan Sheldon Wiseberg. Today, we're going to preview the NHL Draft that has taken place tonight in October. What is this, right, Sheldon? What is this?
I know. Hockey should be starting now.
Yeah, I actually, fun fact. This past Sunday was the 1 year anniversary of Kasperi Kapanen being an idiot and throwing his stick at Jeff Petrie, which led to the Leafs blowing a 4-1 lead in the third period and the Canadiens winning 6-5, I believe, in a shootout, right? So,
Yes.
but I forgot to ask Sheldon, how are you, by the way?
I'm doing great now that I'm back on the show after so long.
Yeah, I'll be honest. Look, the Habs were out in the first round, kind of as we didn't even expect them to be in the first round, but after a short but impressive and fun playoff run that was not supposed to happen. We focused on football quite a bit. Obviously, still kept up with the playoffs, but my coverage has been more on football. But now that the draft is here, let's talk about hockey. Why not? So, Sheldon, I want to first ask you about, or we'll first talk about these moves that the Canadiens have made so far this offseason. Canadiens have traded for backup goaltender Jake Allen. The Canadiens have traded for Joel Edmondson, and they signed him to a 4-year, $14 million contract at a cap hit of $3.5 million per year. And then they also re-signed defenseman Jeff Petrie for I don't have the new. Oh yeah, here it is. It's a 4-year, $25 million contract, an average annual cap hit of $6.25 million. So how we feel about that, Sheldon?
Well, for Jake Allen, look, I've heard enough of people saying you invested $15 million in your goaltending. But remember, this is just for 1 year. Allen has a chance of going to Seattle in the expansion draft, so he'll be off the books. And this allows Caden Primo to refine his game in Laval for 1 more year. So when he comes up to the NHL, he is getting experience behind Carey Price to be his heir when Price retires or is traded, which is very unlikely.
Yeah, so the Canadiens obviously find themselves in tough places right now with with the Price contract and the Weber contract, just from the contract standpoint, because as long as they will Price live up to a $10 million goaltender. We kind of saw it in these playoffs, but in 2025, 26, will he be worth a $10.5 million goaltender when he is going to be, what is he now, 33? So let's say 37, 38 years old. I don't think so. But for now, it is what it is. And like you said, with Jake Allen, being that proven guy who can be a starter. He's a below average starting goaltender, but I think he'll be a very good backup for Carey Price, and that's what this team needs. That just stopgap for about 30 games or so. A guy that can play 30 games for the Canadiens and not lose every single one of them and not give up an 8.75 save percentage and a 3.2 goals or even 4 something goals against average. I think that's how bad Keith Kincaid's numbers were, but yeah, so we know that's a good move. And also, here's the thing: I believe that Caden Primo, he was good in the couple of starts that he had last year, and he could be the guy going forward to play maybe even almost a 50-50 split with Carey Price, almost like we saw with Robin Lehner and Marc-Andre Fleury in Vegas this year, although it was more Lehner down the stretch, and he just signed his extension. But yeah, just the Canadiens now are good at goaltender, and they're also good at defense because Joel Edmondson, Jeff Petrie, Shea Weber, Brett Kulak, Ben Sherratt, even the kids. You got Romanov, Brooke. You got all the kids coming up, and that they might get opportunities. But here's I like the Edmondson deal, especially I think it was just for a 5th-round pick to acquire his rights. Is that what it was? Correct me if I'm wrong.
I
Yeah.
think so, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm cool with that. But I still have Carl Alsner PTSD. On Twitter and social media, there were a lot of fans, saying how, oh, Joel, because Habs Twitter, of course, we know is crazy in itself, but there were a lot of fans that were like, oh, Joel Edmondson, yeah, he's really good, helped the Blues win a Stanley Cup. He was a top 4 guy on the Blues team that won the Stanley Cup, but he was also, maybe a Carl Alsner. We'll see. But I look, I'm just saying, I like it. I still have not quite recovered from Carl Alsner PTSD. The good news is, though, he's making about $750K less than Carl Alsner's contract is worth. So, hey, for now, I'm happy in the short term about that move for Joel Edmondson.
Yeah. What I like about the Edmondson signing, terms a little iffy because the Canadiens have such prominent, not necessarily elite, but really good defensive prospects. So they could come up within 3 years. However, remember with Edmondson that he played really well with the Blues in a top 4 role. His defensive play and performance dipped a bit in Carolina because they were using a different defensive system that wasn't so much on structured play. I think it was a bit more man-on-man. Edmondson thrived in St. Louis with that controlled defensive style where they don't play man-on-man as much. Canadiens play a very similar style defensively to St. Louis, so I expect Edmondson to do well, especially given how Sherratt rebounded from an early poor performance at the start of last season.
And especially if we see the Canadiens carry over what they did in these playoffs with their defense core, they'll be okay. They'll be good on defense.
Yeah.
When during the regular season we didn't think that was the case, but let's just see again how you have Romanov coming up. You have maybe even Yilson will be in there. I don't know how long Victor Mete will last on this team, but we'll see how the young prospects mix in with the proven veteran leadership on this defense. But now. Mm-hmm. We have the draft tonight, so let's get right into talk about the NHL draft.
Yes.
So Canadiens, because they decided to beat the Pittsburgh Penguins, which now in hindsight, I guess we can all be happy with because they made it a series against the Philadelphia Flyers and they gave us playoff hockey for the first time since 2017. So the Canadiens are not going to be drafting first overall. They won't be drafting that high, but they will be drafting at 16. And so that being said, a couple of players that absolutely won't be there. Unfortunately, Alex Lafreniere will not be there. Quinton Byfield won't be there. Tim Stutzel won't be there. Jamie Drysdale won't be there. Cole Perfetti won't be there. Lucas Raymond, maybe Jake Sanderson won't be there. We'll see. Marco Rossi won't be there. I don't think Alex Holtz will be there. I don't think Anton Lundell will be there either. But who will be there or who can be there? Maybe Jack Quinn. Maybe Jack Quinn out of Ottawa from the OHL. Maybe Rodion Amirov, if I'm saying that correctly. Maybe Dawson Mercer. I hear a lot of good things. Or I hear the Canadiens really like Dawson Mercer. Maybe Noel Gunler. I personally like Tyson Forster. I don't think a lot of people are high on Tyson Forster, but I like the production with Barrie in the OHL. And then also there's Braden Schneider, the defenseman. And also other names I've seen out there: Connor Zary, the center, Lucas Reichel, Jacob Perreault, Hendrix Lapierre, Caden Gooley, and Maverick Bourque. So I just named a lot of players there and a lot of prospects. So Sheldon, let me start by asking you right now, who do you think are your favorites right now?
Dawson Mercer. He could do basically anything and can play any position as well. I call me crazy, but I'm high on Jacob Perreault going at 16, even though he should go a little later in the draft. And I just started looking into Rodion Amirov. He looks really good too. But I do not see the Canadiens taking a defenseman, especially Braden Schneider, because, and it's not that the Canadiens don't want him, is that I think the Leafs are going to take him with that pick they got from the Penguins in the Kapanen trade. And they need a guy like that.
Yeah, the Penguins just got schooled in that trade, in my opinion, because that was just like the Leafs. They helped the Leafs un-F up the F up that they did in signing Patrick Marleau and having to trade his salary away for that first round pick. So the Penguins just helped the Leafs there, and Kapanen's just a guy who will throw his stick at defensemen on the penalty kill. So no, Kapanen's a decent top. Middle, let's call him a middle six forward, and he'll be okay with Crosby and Malkin. But yeah, just going back to the draft now, I agree with you on Dawson Mercer. But here's my question though. Here's what I am wondering: Do the Canadiens? Because here's the thing with the NHL draft, and what kind of I personally think I'm of the idea that these kids should have at least another year or two in junior or college or overseas or something before they get picked. Because, if you look in the NFL, drafting 21, 22, 23-year-olds is so much easier than drafting 18-year-olds, 17 and 18-year-olds. So, but that being said, and because of that, we aren't going to see a lot of these kids in 2, 3, maybe even 4 years from now. So, all that being said, I'm wondering, do the Canadiens take the approach of right now we need size and we need offensive talent at the wing position? Because with Danault, Suzuki, Kotkaniemi, can't believe it took us this long to mention them. But with those three guys at center right now for this year, our short-term need is goal scoring and size, which Caulfield has the scoring, but he doesn't have the size, and he won't be ready this year. He won't be ready for this year. So the Canadiens, I almost said Cowboys, the Canadiens look for goal scoring and high-end offensive talent for the future, or do they take the best player available? And if the defenseman Jake Sanderson is there, or even maybe Braden Schneider is there, or something, do they go with the best player available approach, or do they go with the we need goal scoring right here, right now, and we'll address that in the draft, but we won't see it for 4 years? Which way do you think the Canadiens will go?
The Canadiens need help on the wing, which is why I am firmly behind the position that the Canadiens will go after a right winger in this draft. Now, some of the guys we mentioned have been playing center, but it's very easy to move them over to the wing. Suzuki and Kotkaniemi are locks at center in the top 6. But for a guy like Mercer, for example, I don't expect him up for 2 years max, not 4. Because you look at Cole Caulfield, great goal scorer. I'm not worried about his size at all. He's dealt with it his entire life. After him on the Canadiens the depth chart, who do they have? Jesse Ylonen? He's a middle 6 guy. You need a top 6 right winger, and that is why the Canadiens should go after them now.
Especially since Gallagher is only under contract for another year. He's likely going to get extended. That could be a whole discussion for another video, but he deserves it. But if he does get extended, it would be more because of what he did, not because of what he will do. But again, we could talk about that in another video. So yeah, absolutely, the need is there for offensive scoring, offensive firepower on the wings. And here's another thing I'd like to talk about, though, is when you look at the NHL draft and you look at, again, drafting 18-year-olds, but here's one thing that we've seen in taking a player like a Kotkaniemi versus maybe not a Kucherov, but maybe more so like a Braden Point type of player in the second round. It's kind of comparing apples to oranges, but the reason why I'm comparing Braden Point to Kotkaniemi is when you talk about offense and scoring prowess, I personally am more comfortable with taking players that are more familiar with the North American rink and the North American style of tight, hockey versus the European style. It's wide ice and a lot more time and space out there, but also tighter defensively. So all I'm getting at here is European prospects. Well, you can get a Pedersen. You could always get a great high-end talent from overseas, Dahlin, of course. But I find if you're taking in the middle of the first round, I feel like you're a bit better off taking from the OHL or the Q or the WHL versus taking from overseas. What do you think about that?
Drafting overseas is always an issue, and enough had been said over the years about the Russian factor, where the Russian players would want to go home. So maybe that's why I didn't look at Amarov that much, because I want to look at the North American guys first. But I'd rather look at skill set and position over where they're playing, even though many of the European systems produce really good hockey players and they emphasize skill so much, I think even a little more than toughness. But it's harder to tell. If you look at guys like Alex Holtz, arguably the best goal scorer in the draft, his numbers don't jump out at you offensively because he's playing in the men's league. So whereas you have a guy like Lafreniere who puts up 100 points, in his sleep in the queue, a proven goal scorer like Holtz in Sweden is going to put up less than a point per game. So it's hard to take those into account.
Exactly. And we're not discriminating against obviously players from different countries and all that. We're not saying that's the issue. Just the only issue is that it is a different game out there and they are playing against men. So I was actually listening to Gord Miller on a podcast after one of the Canadiens and Flyers games. Yeah, I think it was one of the Canadiens Flyers games. I was listening to Gord Miller and saying how a guy like Suzuki, that's who I want to compare Kotkaniemi to. That's a good comparison right there because Suzuki put up 120 whatever points with Guelph in the OHL. So if Suzuki hits a wall as a young player in a prominent scoring or prominent role at forward for the Canadiens as a top 6 center or a top 2 center, he has, if things aren't going well for Suzuki, he could think, you know what, I put up 130 points in junior by doing A, B, C, D. So he can draw back on that experience and put it together at the NHL level and maybe bounce back from a slump. Whereas Kotkaniemi, if you're counting on Kotkaniemi to be a guy that is almost a point per game player to produce, let's just say produce offensively for now, well, he doesn't have that experience that I put up 100 points in the OHL or in the Superliga or in the KHL. He doesn't have that experience to drop back on. So when you're talking about bringing a young player into the starting lineup within 2 years of getting drafted, then if they hit that wall, they don't have that experience to drop back on. And that's why also I have an issue with taking your players from the Swedish and European leagues and rushing them. If you're going to give them the time to develop, then sure. If the Canadiens if this was 2 years ago and the Canadiens, were fully rebuilding, they were just a bottom 5 team in the NHL and they were fully rebuilding and had little chance of making the playoffs, then sure, take all the time that you want. But right now the Canadiens have shown that they can be a playoff team. And once you're in the playoffs, as the Dallas Stars have shown this year, who knows?
Yep, exactly. It's a different system over there, but still teaching offensive players to play a bit well defensively. It can be taught with the right guys. And fortunately, I think the Canadiens have that. Ducharme and no, Richardson only handles the defenseman. Ducharme as the main assistant coach, Joel Bouchard is the head coach in Laval. They're doing a lot of great work with their younger players and their prospects, at least those that are in Laval.
But that being said, also, coming back to, again, this whole European versus North American issue, I really like Rodion Amirov. Again, the Russian factor, European factor, sure. But coming back to our favorites, so I would say my favorites, I would say if Jack Quinn is somehow still there, I'm all over Jack Quinn if he's still there at 16 somehow. A little undersized, but again, these kids are 18 years old. So right now he might be 5'11" and around, 176 or so. But in 2 years from now, he could be, 6'1" and 190 or maybe 6 foot 180. So I would take Jack Quinn. Absolutely. I also I do like Dawson Mercer, as we've discussed. Again, still a little lanky at 6 foot 170, but he's still, I think, on all the reports I've seen, he's a really good two-way player, and he has produced at the Q level. Q, is that the Q? Yeah, he is from Drummondville. I think he's from the Maritimes. That's why I was confusing.
He's from Newfoundland, played Drummondville, and then I think he was traded to Chicoutimi actually.
Yeah, but the point is, he's produced in the Q, and that's where, again, those guys, and even Tyson Forster, I like, even though Tyson Forster might not be high on a lot of people's draft boards, I do like his production in the OHL. And then guys like Noel Gunler, even Alex Holtz to some extent. Again, that's where you're talking, the talent, the upside, but not the production that you'd necessarily want, or not the production that excites you in terms of if you want to see them on the team within the next 2 years, or 3 years. So and then obviously a couple of other guys, like I mentioned, Maverick Bourque, Caden Gooley, Hendrix Lapierre, French Canadian, of course. There's always, the draft is in Montreal this year, so and same thing can be said for Jacob Perreault, Lucas Reichel, and Connor Zary. I personally, if we're gonna go the offensive route, I would like look if you're gonna take a like if you deem one of those centers or natural centers as a guy that can easily shift to the wing and will play on the wing and will produce at the wing, go for it and score goals at the wing, go for it. But to me, what I also don't want, I don't want another Max Domi situation where we're telling him to play wing, but oh, I want to play center when you already have, Kotkaniemi, Suzuki, and Dano at center.
Yeah, that's a good point. The Domi situation is heating up.
And again, we can make a whole other video on that.
Oh
He
yeah.
did he did get a qualifying offer, correct?
Yes, he did.
Yeah, so he has obviously been tendered, but again, like that's if we're going the offense route, I would say just again pick someone who has the offensive scoring power from the wing position, or if they played center, make sure that they're okay to play wing
Yeah.
and don't have them just in 2 years from now say, oh, I want like Galchenyuk or Domi, where it's like, oh, I'd rather play center and not play wing. Like, no, that's not what this
Yeah.
team can use right now.
Mhm.
But that being said, there has also been a lot of talk about trading the pick, and Marc Bergevin has the Montreal media right where he wants them, where he's just holding his hand really close to his chest. His cards are really close to his chest. He's saying one day that, oh, he's not going to mortgage the future for a Line or a type of short-term player, for now. But then he's saying how, oh, I never said that I'm not interested in Line. So he's really picking his words carefully. So let's just talk about straight up. Do we rather make the pick or trade the pick? What would we prefer?
Make the pick easily. Moving up in the draft, because that is the only way to improve our chances if you're going through the draft. That will mortgage the future, including a lot of good prospects and defensive prospects, by the way. I don't want to lose any of them right now. If you're going to trade for Line or Hall, it's going to be on a very short-term contract.
Well, Hall is also, keep in mind, an unrestricted free agent. So I'm talking more about a Line or maybe even a
okay.
Johnny Gaudreau player like that.
Okay. You know what? I did hear a while back that there was a rumor going around it would be Paling, Canadiens first, and Domi for Gaudreau. That is a very aggressive trade, and you'd only get a year and a half's production out of Gaudreau. When Bergevin said, I believe it was yesterday, he'd rather not trade the pick for a guy who's incredibly short term, but for a guy who can help out for longer, say 4 years, that would be the way to go. But it's difficult anyway. I'm still behind the train of thought that right now the Canadiens are still in the reset where it's not a good idea to trade your first round pick. I wish they were drafting first overall. But maybe next year with an improved performance this season, you can think of moving that pick. And there's free agency anyway. Mike Hoffman, I got my eye on him this free agency period for the Canadiens to make an offer.
I kind of disagree with you on that. So I would say, look, Johnny Gaudreau, who I believe will be an unrestricted free agent at the end of the season, correct?
It's 2 years from now, I think.
2 years from now. Okay, so
Yeah.
still 2 years from now. So even then you have 2 years to negotiate the contract. But what I don't love is the lack of size. Again, Johnny Gaudreau, heck of a player, offensive skill, everything that you want in terms of like a best player. But just the Canadiens already have that. They already have a Suzuki, who's gonna keep getting better. Even Tatar during the regular season, right?
Yeah.
Is still not quite a point per game player, but he produces. And yeah, so just I feel like if the Canadiens, like, I would not do a first Domi and Paling for Gaudreau, but I'd consider it for Line. I think it would need more for Line, but here's the thing with Line also, he is a restricted free agent at the end of this season. So that means, he's not gonna just become an unrestricted free agent and sign with the Rangers or the Leafs or the Panthers after this season. The Canadiens will still own his rights and they can negotiate a long-term contract. And I just think, and Line is still 22 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah, 22 years old, Line is. So so right now I see Line as the guy. Like if you're gonna trade the pick, it has to be for a Line or a Line type player.
Hmm.
And that's actually what I think. Look, I would say I would slightly prefer that. If I had to choose, if I knew that I could get Patrick Laine for my first round pick and not completely mortgaging my future, if it's just the first round pick and let's say a Domi and a Paling, maybe a Mete also you throw in there, a
Yeah.
package, not just like a one off for Kotkaniemi or something, I would absolutely consider that. And I believe, and I would want Bergevin and this Canadian staff to at least do their due diligence in seeing if Winnipeg can do that.
Yeah. Winnipeg is a much more likely team than with Calgary and with Gaudreau. Line A is the goal scorer compared to Gaudreau, who's a playmaker. Um, and the Canadians need goal scoring now. And because there had been an exodus at center for Winnipeg with Brian Little, he's not going to play anymore. The Jets have a need for a second line center, and that's where you start the deal with Max Domi. However, because Patrick Laine is a bona fide goal scorer, you're going to have to give up even more than just the first round pick, Domi, Paling, a defenseman. We're talking probably another first round pick and another prominent prospect, maybe even Romanov. I'd be very concerned about that.
But then again, like I don't. Again, that's where you have to establish the line in
Yeah.
terms of how much you give up for Patrick Laine.
Hmm.
You know, what I absolutely don't want is the rumors, or just again, that's more, I guess, hockey Twitter rumors
Oh
of
yeah.
trading the first round pick for Josh Anderson of the Columbus Blue Jackets, or even homeboy Alex Killorn, who I got to be on the ice with for a few times back in my Lac Saint Louis Tigers playing days. I stopped him a few
Wow.
times, but he made me look stupid most of the time. But the thing is, again, if you're going to get up the first round pick, not for Killorn, not for Josh Anderson, but it has to be as part of a package for a Line type player if you're going
Yeah.
to trade the first round pick.
Yeah.
And who else? I'm trying to think who else would who else that's on the trade block would that first round pick be worth it? I even saw maybe not first round straight up for Phil Kessel, not straight up for Phil Kessel, but
No.
if you look at Phil Kessel's contract situation and you look at what he brings versus what this team needs, I saw someone, I forget who was on Twitter suggesting that, but I could potentially get down with that over overpaying a Mike Hoffman or maybe even a Taylor Hall. I would be down for Taylor Hall, but is it likely with the Canadiens' track record of signing unrestricted free agents? No. And
No.
what will it cost you, and how many games will Taylor Hall be healthy for? We don't know.
Yeah.
So
Um, you know what? Actually, I heard something that the asking price for Phil Kessel in a rebuilding Arizona Coyotes team would start with a second round pick. That could work. It could
potentially.
work. Yeah, the Canadians have three of them. I'm sure Bergevin could trade a pick. He's done that already. It's
And the
from
Coyotes, I don't think they pick till the fourth round. Sorry to interrupt. They don't have a pick till the fourth round, I don't think, right?
they certainly don't have a first or a second round pick. They scouted players illegally or something. Yeah, the league came in and said discipline. You lose picks. But they're still rebuilding, and because Kessel's been really down recently in Arizona, not I'm not talking mental health, but performance wise, the asking price is really low. And for a guy who could put up 80 points a year, second round pick is really good. I would do that.
But then again, it's Kessel. You have to be careful because he's the type of player that if he's not scoring goals for you, he's doing nothing else. Patrick
Yeah,
Laine is like that too. Don't get me wrong,
yeah.
but Patrick Laine is 22 years old, and Patrick Laine can score even more goals and put up more points than Phil Kessel can.
And he can hit. I mean, you see the
He's six
size
foot
of this thing?
five, 6'4", whatever it is.
He's a giant and he's got a bit of a chip on his shoulder. You don't want to go into the corner or front of the net with him.
I would say with Line it's more when he wants to hit and when he wants to be physical, he will be physical.
Yeah,
But the problem is he
he
doesn't
doesn't
want
want
to all
to
the
as
time.
much.
Yeah.
Right. But
So
when he
so that's
wants to,
definitely, yeah. But that's why. But again, Line just for the fact that he's 22 years old and he is more that type of player than Phil Kessel is, right? Like that's why that package, or that, maybe not so much mortgaging the future, but giving up a very large lump sum trade package for Line is that much more worth it for that versus Kessel. And sorry, I'm a little distracted here because I just got news from TSN here that the Montreal Canadiens placed defenseman Carl Alsner on unconditional waivers to buy out the remaining 2 years of his contract. That just came in just a second. So Carl Alsner finally being bought out by the Canadiens. It's enough bearing his contract in the AHL. Let me just look at the what's it called? The implications of buyout his contract here. Can I do that?
There's a cap buyout penalty for that.
There will be. So it looks like the Canadiens will have a penalty. He'll have a $3.9 million cap hit this year, a $1.9 million cap hit next year. And then for the remaining 2 years between 2022 and 2024, it'll be $833,000 on the salary cap in terms of a penalty. So Carl Alsner being bought out by the Canadiens. And just when we were talking about that at the top of the show with Joel Edmondson, Carl Alsner gets bought out by the Canadiens. So that's fun stuff. But hey, great guy. Carl Alsner was a great guy, just not the best hockey player, not the best defenseman, and maybe overachieved with playing along with John Carlson there in Washington. But hey, we just wish him the best, and hopefully, look, he gets what he wants in life. That's all, because he's a good guy and he deserves it. Just unfortunately, he's not the best defenseman on the Canadiens roster, and his contract was what it was. So yeah.
Actually, I wanted to bring up something. There's been a lot of talk about the Canadiens taking Hendrix Lapierre. If you don't mind, I'd like to throw in my 2 cents on him.
Sure.
So I'm not concerned about his injury issues as my primary concern, although it should be. Apparently, there was a misdiagnosis issue with C1 or C2, and he was getting headaches. They thought it was a concussion originally, and then 2 concussions. I'm not concerned about his skating because he's actually pretty good. He's a great playmaker, but that's the problem. For those fans who want Lapierre to be drafted by the Canadiens, by the way, no relation to Maxime Lapierre, very different players as well. Look, I get that he was projected as a top 10 pick before he got hurt because of his elite playmaking ability, but the Canadiens already have playmaking centers. And I think Lapierre's shot is severely underpowered. If you look at his goal totals from the last several years, he's an exclusive playmaker. He doesn't have a nose for the net at all. Canadiens have too many of playmakers and two-way wingers. So that's why I say the Canadiens need goal scorers. And if not those guys, two-way wingers. But for a team that needs a playmaking center, get Lapierre, because the guy can pass in traffic like nobody's business, But I don't see the Canadiens taking him.
Yeah, he was a point per game player with the Intrépide de Gatineau in Midget Espoir, the team that I played against back when I played for the Lac Saint Louis Tigers as well. But yeah, like you mentioned, I guess because of injury, he was 17 points in 19 games for the Saguenay in Chicoutimi, and I think it's 5 points. He did put up 5 points, I think, in the playoffs in 2 playoff games with the Saguenay. Am I looking at that right? Or yeah, that was the shortened playoffs, it looks like. But yeah, just here's the thing with Lapierre and with Hendrix Lapierre and any other center on these draft boards is I feel like Billy Bean here with the can he get on base? For me, I'm asking the question, can they play winged? Can they score goals? That's my question that I'm asking when scouting out these prospects. So in Hendrix Lapierre, I have my doubts in terms of his ability to be a bona fide goal scoring winger. So anyway, but let's move on, and we have a couple minutes left on the show here, but let's make our predictions. What will happen tonight in the first round of the NHL draft for the Montreal Canadiens? Who will be the pick, or will they even make the pick? Will they trade the pick, or will they make the pick? And if they do make the pick, who will it be?
They're going to keep the pick, and they're going to select. If Jarvis and Quinn are gone by that point, which I predict they do, it's going to be Dawson Mercer from Newfoundland and Labrador, channeling his inner Michael Ryder of the mid-2000s.
I'm going with Dawson Mercer as well. So yeah, I think Seth Jarvis, again, production's there, but he's also a Gallagher Caulfield type of mold. But that's why I really like Dawson Mercer, and I think he will be the pick if he's there. If Jack Quinn somehow manages to fall, I think he will be the pick. But if not, then yeah, I feel pretty good about predicting that it will be Dawson Mercer that the Canadiens will draft 16th overall in the 2020 virtual NHL draft. So there we go. That's our show for the NHL draft, or our preview. And thank you so much for joining the show today, Sheldon. It was nice to talk Montreal Canadiens and hockey for the first time in a while.
Mike, it is always a pleasure to be a guest on your show. Bring me back some more times.
100%. Look, we're going to be doing a free agency preview in all likelihood before next week, and we're supposed to have Hugh Burrow on the show from Sportsnet 590 tomorrow. That will get postponed to next week, but we'll work on that. And yeah, if you enjoy our commentary, enjoy my channel, then subscribe. Hit the thumbs up button to like this video. Follow me on Twitter. Follow me on Instagram. My handle will be included in the description below as usual. This has been a LANGERR at the mic NHL draft preview. Thanks for watching, and see you again next time.